Hi, this is Debbie with Book and Bujo, and welcome here. Today we are going through my November wrap-up. To start with, we will go through some of my stats, and then we will go through all of the books that I read. Let me get my handy-dandy little cheat sheet out. Although I didn't read as many books as I did in October, I still read 12 books, I think. So I refer to my handy-dandy little cheat sheet from my reading journal. So I read 12 books total. I did have 2 that I didn't quite finish. One is a book that I'm doing for a review, and the other was my D20 roll, which I'm somewhat rolling into December, but probably going to roll into January instead to finish that. I read 5,294 pages, which is definitely less than I have the previous few months. And I listened to 126.5 hours of audiobooks. And I think that's where a lot of my, the difference is. I didn't listen to as many audiobooks as I have previously. Because I think in October, October I listened to 187.75 hours, so basically 188 hours, and this time I only did 126. I definitely physically read slower, or eyeball read slower than I do with audiobooks, even though some of the audiobooks, they were mixed media, so I was reading along as I was listening to, and I can usually listen a little faster that way. But I had 1 3-star, I had 7 4-stars, and 4 5-star reads. So enjoyment-wise, I had a great reading month. Let's see, demographics: 1 middle grade, 4 YA, and 7 adult books. I did read all 12 books were standard novels, no short stories or anything. I read 3 fantasy, 1 thriller, 2 classics. One of those classics could be considered an actual fantasy as opposed to a classic, but I'm counting it as a classic. 2 horror, 1 mythology, 1 nonfiction, 1 contemporary, and 1 mystery. I got my books, 7 of them I borrowed from the library, 2 of them I borrowed from friends, and 3 of them I owned. I listened to 5 audiobooks, so 4 mixed media, so that makes 9 audiobooks basically, 2 ebooks, and 1 physical book. And then the publication dates between all of the books that I read were between 1878 and 2022. So a fairly good mix overall. It was a good reading month. Okay, so let's go through the actual books that I read. So let's start up with roll number 1 was a physical book, and I read Small Angels by Lauren Owen, and I did give that one 5 stars. That one was so atmospheric. Oh, it was so good. I just got so immersed into that story, and you follow multiple perspectives. Oh, they just interacted very well together, the different perspectives. So the pace can be a bit slow. I don't actually mind a slow pace for the most part, as long as there's a reason for it. If there's character building or world building, or something is going on, like they're building you up to something, then I'm fine with a slow pace. And that's kind of how this one was. So it was building you up to the end of the story. So kind of think of like a slow burn romance or something that gets you somewhere in the end. The atmosphere was just gothic. It was paranormal. I just felt utterly immersed. Like I felt like I was in the Mockbeggar woods with all of the characters. It was amazing, and I liked the different points of view from each of the characters that lent a different perspective to the story itself. So you can have one incident happen, you can have 5 people standing in 5 different areas, and so they all see things a little bit differently, but that doesn't mean none of them are wrong, right? They're all true. So that's kind of how this one felt. It was really interesting. Mockbeggar Woods is at the edge of a small church, or the small church is at the edge of Mockbeggar Woods. And there's an upcoming wedding between Sam and Chloe, and Sam is a local boy. Him and his sister Kate grew up in the area. And there's a deep family history from the perspective of Lucia, who actually lives at the house right at the edge of Mockbecker Woods, and her family have been caretakers of the woods, or of the area. The woods are alive and have a long memory, so don't mess with them, because they will mess with you. Yes, there's a haunting and a slow unfolding of the story. Yeah, I don't want to say too much. I think I did a good thing going into the story blind, like I wasn't sure what was going on. From the beginning, I didn't know what to expect. It was a book club book, so I was like, oh great, let's read this. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would go in blind and just not know what's happening and just enjoy the slow walk through the woods. It was great. Alright, so next I read Furyborn, and that was for Amazon Borrows. That was my second roll, and I did give this one 4 stars. This one, you basically have 2 different perspectives in 2 different time periods. So you have Riel, who is from the past time period. Eliana is the current time period perspective. And it goes back and forth each chapter. So chapter 1 is Riel, chapter 2 is Eliana, and chapter 3. So all the odd chapters are basically Riel, and all the even are Eliana's. Or vice versa, one of the 2. But it doesn't make it too confusing. So it's pretty easy to follow back and forth. And again, didn't really know much about this book. I wasn't like back into like reading and sharing my thoughts and things like that when this book originally came out. So I didn't really know anything about it. It is the first book in the Imperium series, and it's by Clare Legrand. So it's a solid 4-star. It didn't quite reach that 5-star mark for me, but it's definitely a solid 4-star. I think as the series progresses and you get more into the story, even more so than what we are now, I think that has a potential to go into a 5-star series. The main 2 characters are solid. The side characters, some of the side characters I actually think I almost care about more than the main character. For me, I really liked Eliana and her perspective, all the side characters and her story. Riel, I wasn't as invested in her. I didn't care about what happened to her quite as much. And I don't know if that's because I know it was already in the past, and so her story's already done. Not sure. But the 2, Simon and Eliana, like, I want to know what's going on with them. Like, what is happening? What is going to happen to them? Yes, I want to know it all. I'm invested in what happens to them. The side characters for Riel, again, I'm not as invested in them. I'm not sure why. That whole perspective, that whole time period. I think it's more because it's in the past, so the story's already done, so I don't have to care as much. Not sure why, but I'm definitely more invested in Eliana and Simon, as well as Remy, Eliana's brother. He's so cute. So the world building system, or the world building is good. The magic system is interesting. Like, I could actually picture it happening, picture in my mind what's going on as it's being described, which is nice because I can't always do that. The writing is original, like the storyline I think is pretty original. It's very easy to read, can be a bit repetitive because you're going back and forth, and of course Eliana's timeline, they already know what happened to Riel, so you kind of get a little bit of that perspective from both time periods, which can be a little repetitive, but not too bad. It helps solidify the actual story. I do feel that Riel's story and her storyline is important to understanding where they are now. It's good that we're learning about that and that we're getting to know Riel and what's going on in her story in order to understand the time period that Eliana lives in and what's going on at that point. So it's a good first book in the series, and I'm excited to see what happens in the second book. If it just keeps building on it, I'm hoping it doesn't suffer from second book syndrome, where it kind of like, that the glue between the first and the third book, which are both good, and the second one's kind of meh. I'm hoping not. I'm hoping that the second book answers some questions and keeps you moving forward towards what the third book will be. Furyborn, 4 stars. Next, I read The Last of the Moon Girls by Barbara Davis, and this is another one of those random books that I had on my Kindle. It's a mystery thriller with some fantasy aspects. There's a magic system involved. So we're following Elizabeth, or Lizzie Moon, and her family. So she is a perfumer in New York. When she finds out that her grandmother has passed away and she needs to go back home to settle the estate. So basically everything was left to her. But she hasn't been home for 8 years, and when she did leave, it wasn't necessarily on a happy note. And so she's not really excited about returning and picking up any part of that life again. So she's hoping she can just go in, get the farm, the Moon Farm, on the market and get out. Pack up the house and get on out of Dodge and get back to her life. But she finds that nothing is ever easy, right? One of the reasons she wanted to get out is was a double murder. 2 sisters passed away, and they were found in the pond on the Moon family farm. Everything pointed towards her grandmother as the one who killed the girls, but there's no way that the grandmother could have killed those girls, because she was just as sweet, and her life was built on doing no harm. But there was no evidence one way or the other, so no one was ever convicted of the crime. But of course there was a witch hunt for Althea Moon, the grandmother. And so that, when you're growing up and you're in high school and whatever, and so Lizzie got stuck with a whole lot of baggage that she shouldn't have had to grow up with. So while she's home, she decides she starts clearing away, boxing up everything in the house, and she decides that she wants to clear her grandmother's name and find out who actually killed the 2 sisters. And so doing this opens up a whole can of worms. Someone starts coming after her, and we go from there. She meets up again with her neighbor, who she went to high school with, and a friendship sorta is there. He wants to be friends. She still just kind of wants to get out. And then it just kind of goes from there. So it's a mystery thriller that delivers chills and suspense, most definitely, as well as the feel-good vibes of family and love. Not just blood family, but found family as well. So there's some found family in here, in this book too, which is nice. I think probably about halfway through the book I was able to kind of guess the ending, and I think that's more just because my mind kept trying to figure out, the whodunit and everything. But it probably wasn't until the last third that I was pretty positive that I was right, so that was nice. It wasn't disappointing to me. That was more like, ooh, pat on my back, I got it right, yay, right? So the Moon family does have, for the magic system, the Moon family does have a gift that they pass along from mother to daughter, and to daughter to daughter to daughter. And they're not meant to marry or have men in their lives for very long. So they're all single mothers, raising their daughters on their own. I think there was one time when there was a son, but I don't think he lived long. So yeah, it's basically all women. Each Moon's gift is a little bit different. So like Althea, Lizzie's grandmother, had a gift of healing, so whether that be plants or people. Lizzie has the gift of scent, so when you're with her, she could smell your emotions on you. So if you're happy, if you're in love, if you're sad, if you're living with regret, any of those kind of things, she can kind of smell that on you. If you're evil, apparently you have a scent then as well. But each Moon daughter also gets their own book to then pass on their knowledge to future generations to help them find their gifts. There are some trigger warnings pretty big in this book. There's abuse, there's murder, there's death of a loved one, mental health issues, and some other things like that. So just keep those in mind before you pick this up. Yeah, I thought it was intriguing. I was in it till the end. I thought the pacing was fairly good. But overall, I thought this was great. I gave it a solid 4 stars. Yeah. It's a good book. I would highly recommend it. Especially if you like the mystery thriller genre with a touch of magic thrown in. Alright, so next was a reread, and that is The Sword of Summer by Riordan. This is the first book in the Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard series. And this one is a reread, and that was for my 4th roll. reread. And this one was a mixed media, so I listened to it on audiobook as I was reading it. It didn't disappoint again. It was a low 4-star or 5-star, like it just hit 5-star right at the edge. I think it was like a 9.0, 9.00 on Compile. So it just made the 5-star. It's not quite as engaging as the Percy Jackson series to me, but it's still just as good. Like the humor in it is fun. I love that Annabeth makes a cameo appearance in the book. And it's interesting. So it's again, it's the first book, so you're starting to get to know the Norse mythology, so the Vikings and all of the different gods that they have, the different worlds that they have, which aren't necessarily as well known as the Greek and Roman mythology of the Percy Jackson series. So there is a little bit of a learning curve, I guess you could say. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I think Magnus Chase was a good character, and I think the side characters around him were really good too. I did enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to starting the second book in the series next year. Alright, so my next role was a book over 500 pages, and for that I read Fool's Quest by Robin Hobb. And yet again, I just love this series so much. And we're back with following Fitz and the Fool. Of course, can't say too much because this is a really long series. And this is the second to last book, so yeah. The first book in the series, you're being introduced to Fitz as a child, and now he's in his 60s or so, and so you've had this long life of his that we've been following him. I think it's one of her best so far. Like, I think almost every book in the series just gets better and better and better, with a little bit of exception of the Rain Wild Chronicles. Those ones are more, it's almost more, here's some backstory because you're going to need this in the future, so here you go, quickie little books for that, which I actually enjoyed them. And I think you do need to read those in order to understand some of the stuff that's going on in these last couple books. And of course, per usual for Robin Hobb, the pacing is slow. It's all about slow burn, character building, world building, plot building, everything. Nothing is fast-paced in this series. And I am here for every word of it. It's just a slow unfurling of the story, and I don't want to see it end. I'm reading the last book now. I'm about 60% of the way through. Okay, moving on. Next roll was my D20, and that was Of Darkness and Light, and that's the one I am rolling over into January. Although 2023 plans and goals of book clubs and stuff, it may just be all high epic fantasy the whole year. We'll see. I might get burnt out with that, though. We'll see what happens. Stay tuned for that video coming up. So then my next was a TBR jar pool, and that was Under the Lilacs by Louisa May Alcott. And all I could say about this book was it was just charming. It was cute and quaint. It's a middle grade book. I did give it 3.5 stars. I think as a child reading this, it would have been one of my favorite books. I would have loved it. I would have probably given it 4 stars. It starts with 2 sisters enjoying a tea party, and during the course of the party, they find that their cake has disappeared. What happened to the cake? Where's the cake? And they can't figure out what happened to it, but later they find out that a boy and his dog who have run away from the circus took it, but he didn't actually eat it. He felt bad, and so he brought it back, and then they shared it and became friends, and then it's just their adventure and this found family living their lives through the summer and all the hijinks and fun that they come up to. It was just adorable. So cute. Alright, next was to read a classic, and for that I read The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I love this book. Like, I've heard that it was so slow and it was just hard to get through. There's a lot of names and some of that kind of stuff. It's all just history of Middle-earth and before the Third Age and all of that. But I thought it was amazing. So this one, I listened to the audiobook while I read the book as well. Read the ebook. And if you can find the audiobook where someone is fluent in Tolkien's languages, oh, it's just beautiful. Like, just listening to it is almost like listening to a lullaby. Oh, it was beautiful. Beautiful. I loved hearing the history, especially since the Rings of Power come out. My husband and I watched those. If you take them on its own, they were enjoyable. If you take them in the full universe of Tolkien, not quite accurate, but it's alright. I enjoyed them as a separate thing, but it brought up a lot of questions and things like that this book then answered, the Silmarillion. Yeah, I loved getting more back history on some of the beloved characters that are in the books, as well as getting to know a whole bunch of new ones and finding more books that I want to read. More epic fantasies. It's all good, right? I can never read enough, right? But I can't wait to read more. But yeah, if you're a fan of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and just J.R.R. Tolkien in general, you gotta read the Silmarillion. It's definitely worth it. And just if you go, I think going into it thinking it's going to be kind of a history book with a lot of names and it's going to be slow going and you just have a lot of glimpses into different sections of that time period, I think it'll go much better than if you're going in thinking this is a nice, fun, fast-paced story, because it's not. Next up, nonfiction book I read, I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy, and that is an excellent book. I gave that one 5 stars. Silmarillion I gave 4.5 stars. So I'm Glad My Mom Died. There are ton of trigger warnings, so make sure you do your research on those because there's a lot. Parental abuse, child exploitation, anorexia, bulimia, emotional and mental abuse, sexual abuse, alcohol abuse, religion, and so much more. So just be aware of that going into it. I love and appreciate her writing style, and her dry humor was right at my alley. She's not afraid to put herself out there. Jennette, like, more power to her. Like, that was brave, being able to come out and tell her story. I never really watched Nickelodeon. That was kind of after my time. I was a little older at that point, so I wasn't really into Nickelodeon too much, but I was able to get to know her and really care about what happened to her just through this book. She's a very talented writer, and I really hope that she continues on that journey and that she gets more and more chances to write more, whether that be for screenplays, movies, TVs, more novels, anything like that. I think I would be willing to pick it up and try it out because she was great. Yeah. And it also, this gives you, I mean, it's her life story, it's her memoir, but I'm sure that there are other child actors who have gone through something similar. And yeah, I feel like I just went through so many emotions while reading this book. Definitely one that you need to read for yourself and not just take someone else's synopsis for it. It's worth it. It's worth the read. All right, book club. So I already talked about Small Angels. That was the Full Moon Book Club with Jan Agaton. And then I read House of Hollow by Krystal Sutherland for the Howling Pack Book Club. And oh my gosh, that was so good. So I gave that one 4.5 stars as well. And this is another one that it's not super fast paced, but it's not slow at all either. And not quite what I was expecting, which I'm not sure what I was expecting because I didn't really know a lot about this. I just knew that 3 sisters went missing when they were younger. A month later they show up and they're back, and that's pretty much all I really knew. So I wasn't expecting the fantasy element, I think, quite as much as what was in there. So it's a gothic horror, which I think we decided it was a cozy gothic horror, which is a new favorite of mine. Cozy gothic horror. Absolutely. I'm there all the time to read those. So good. Had just the right amount of creepiness to it, the creepy vibes, and I loved that the doorway folklore that's included, so almost like kind of like a portal fantasy kind of thing. The atmosphere, the characters were really done well, and the bond that the Hollow Sisters shared was inspiring. Also a little creepy, but inspiring. It was great. I loved that they were there for each other no matter what. And it all just added to the enjoyment of this read. So good. So good. Highly recommend it. And I'm looking forward to reading other Krystal Sutherland books in the future because her writing style was really easy to read. Alright, and then we have the Shadowhunter read-along, and from that we were reading the Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy, and that was actually one of the first books I read for the month, and that one I also gave 4.5 stars by Cassandra Clare. And I loved it. It was so good. So we have basically following Simon's perspective. So Simon's at the Shadowhunter Academy just outside of Alcott. He is learning how to be a Shadowhunter. So he's going to school there and trying to figure out what all is happening. And you mainly get Simon's perspective throughout the whole book, but there are a couple chapters on Magnus's perspective. So, I mean, my two favorite characters of the whole Shadowhunter series, and they're the only perspectives in the book? Heck yeah. So, my favorite chapter was Bitter of Tongue. And I have to explain why. Okay, so, here's a quote. "Feel this arm," said Simon. "Rock hard. I don't mean to brag, but it's all bone." All bone. Oh my gosh. If I had been drinking something at the time, I probably would have spit it out and just been like, that's so funny. And then later, he's quoting the song lyrics from I Need a Hero from Footloose to Isabel, and I just couldn't stop laughing. Oh my gosh, it was so good. So good. Okay, yes. The ending of this book had me almost crying. Like, I did not see that coming. Shame on you, Cassandra Clare. I see why it happened, but shame on you. Good book. Totally recommend it. It's super cute, and I love Simon Starkiness all the time. Got my echinacea tea. Little herbal tea for when you're under the weather. Nothing better. Alright, and then I read The Possibilities by Kaui, Hart, Hemmings, and this was for the Pop Sugar Challenge. Okay, and this one was for a book by a Pacific Islander author. This one was really good. It's a contemporary literary fiction, and I did give this one 4 stars. So it's a story of Sarah St. John and her struggle to find life again after losing her son. So her son has passed away in an avalanche, and she's now got to figure out how to go on living after that. So basically she's had her bereavement time and she's now going back to work, and that's kind of where we jump into her story. And a girl shows up at her house looking for work shoveling snow, and from there we kind of find out who this girl actually is, and how she fits in with Sarah's family. Her dad also lives with her, so we had 3 generations in one house for a time. The story does cover a lot of tough topics, so death of a loved one, teenage pregnancies, but it handles all of it very respectfully and in such a beautiful way. I thought it was written really well. I would definitely recommend it. It was a good one. I'm really glad I read that. So thank you, Pop Sugar Challenge, for broadening all of our horizons with these great challenges that you guys give. Alright, and for the next one is the Buzzwordathon. So I just saw that the 2023 Buzzwordathon just came out. So I'm looking forward to seeing what those ones are going to be. But this one was Ing in the title, and I read The Killing Game by Kate Bold, and I did give this one 4 stars. This one was really interesting too. It's not one I would normally pick up, but it had Ing in the title, and none of the other books on my TBR had that yet. So this is the Alexa Chase series, the first book, and it's a thriller mystery crime suspense novel, which I enjoy, and I like those, but true crime type books aren't really my first choice. Yeah, so it's a fast-paced psychological thriller, and we're following U.S. Marshal Alexa Chase, and we have multiple POVs in this one. So you have a POV from the bad guy, which is always interesting because you don't get a lot of the antagonist perspective in books. We also follow Stuart, the FBI agent that she's working with, as well as herself. And I love that we get to see just the thought processes behind everyone's perspective. So like how they are trying to solve this mystery, how they're trying to, how they interpret the clues and things like that. And it's really interesting. A lot of the characters seemed on the extreme type of their stereotype to me, but it wasn't too over the top. So it was like right towards the top. It didn't go over, if that makes any sense. And I was kind of able to get past it as the story progressed. Like the whole, I must protect the girls never get to do anything, so I always have these walls up kind of thing. And I don't know, it was a little weird here and there, but not too bad, not enough for me to put the book down. The ending I do feel was a bit rushed. I felt like you were building up to something and then it was just kind of like, okay, now we're done. Everything that happened was great, and I think it fit well with the story. It just felt like it wrapped up a little too quick. But I guess that's better than having it drag out and have an extra 100 pages you don't need. So I still gave it 4 stars, thought it was really good, very interesting. And then that was it. So we are done with my November wrap-up. It was a good reading month, not as much as I have in the past, but that's okay. It's not a race. We're just here to read what we want to read and not worry about the page count or the stats or any of that. Just read for your enjoyment and broaden your horizons. Read books that you don't think you would normally read. So, how did your November go? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to have some discussions with you. What was your favorite book in November, and what are you hoping to read in December? Thank you so much for joining me for my November wrap-up, and please hit the like, comment, and subscribe buttons, and make sure you smash that notification bell if you want to hear more from me and see what else is going on. And as always, I will see you in the comments. Bye.